Want to know what it takes to be an elite dad? Brad and I have the privilege to welcome Curt Storring to the podcast. Curt is the founder and owner of Dad.Work. Dad.Work is the hands-on training ground dads need to succeed as much as a man, husband, and father as they do an entrepreneur, executive, or leader. Dad.Work exists to help dads become world-class men, husbands, and fathers with a legacy that truly matters, becoming dads who are hard to kill, easy to love, equipped to lead. Well, hey guys, welcome to another episode of Not Your Average Man. I am Chris. I'm here with my buddy Brad, and again, we're bringing you another special guest. We have Curt Storring. He is from Dad.Work, and if you're on Instagram, you got to go and you got to check him out at Dad.Work.Curt. And we'll put that in the notes, and what we're going to definitely talk about that more. But actually, Jamie, Curt, we joke about that our wives are our producers. So my producer was saying, because I'm a recovering people pleaser, so I tend to be a little more of an easier push, I guess, a gentler push. I don't know. Brad, he's a level up from me. He's definitely a level up, but you bring it even up higher. So it was kind of like we're the low, medium, and high.
That's a nice way to say that. So yeah, we're all rough around the edges except for Chris.
Yeah,
it's cool.
No. I'm saying you all aren't as timid as Chris. Is really what Chris was saying. Chris was saying is like Chris still kind of gets hung up sometimes on please like me. Please. First, I want you to hear the truth, and that's why we're Curt. We want you to know the truth. We want to live by the truth, but sometimes some of us are able to deliver the message in a little with some more gusto than others. So Curt, thanks a lot for joining us. We're really all about to say thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no, I'm thrilled, and this is great because I had you and Jamie on my podcast recently, and it was so good for me. And that's the best one when I get the most out of my own podcast. And I'm like, yeah, this is for the listeners, but this specific question that I need to answer, can you just touch on that? So you guys did a great job on that, and I can't wait. Actually, that went out this week, I believe, when it's already crushing it. I think we had one of the highest days of first day downloads ever. So it's doing amazing, and I'm extremely grateful to be here and hopefully share some insights if I can.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. Fantastic. So that's awesome to hear. I love that a lot. And thanks for coming back and returning the favor.
Yeah.
Because we thought that you definitely have lots to offer our guys listening, because like we talked about, we're trying to call up men. We're not trying to beat them down. We're trying to call them up, right? Trying to help them become better than their average man, so that's, and ways how do you do that, right? How do you step into that realm without like going from 0 to 60, right? And there's guys who are struggling, and a lot of men who are struggling with that. So what you are doing for men is phenomenal and fantastic. And I just personally wanted to say thank you about that.
Thank you.
So with that said, how did you kind of get your start? What brought out the beginning of Dad.Work?
Man, so much of my own struggling. That was the entire story behind it. It's literally just an origin story. I mean, do you want me to get into all of it now? Because that's where it starts.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, pardon me for telling my own story here, but I think it's helpful for a lot of guys to hear at least a message of hope, because I felt hopeless throughout. And so my wife and I look back on it now and I just see, by the grace of God, we figured it out. And at the time I was just like, oh, I've got to figure this out myself. Everything's so hard. But we got married 22 or 23 years old. We had our first son almost immediately, within the year after we were married. And so we hit the ground running. A lot of our friends were older than us, and they're like, yeah, of course, have kids, get married. Very unusual in, this day and age, because most people are like, enjoy your 20s sort of thing. But that was great because we both had agreed we were going to do life differently. We both came from divorced parents. We're like, we are never getting divorced. We're going to have kids. We want to have lots of kids. Let's do it. But at the time, there's no faith background at all. We're just doing this because we thought it was right. And so as we get into parenthood, I start a business. We move 1,000 kilometers away. I'm in Canada, so 600 miles or whatever that is. I start trying to live life. But I don't have any masculine role models. Like my dad was not the man that I learned a lot of the masculinity things from, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to lead my family. I didn't know how to not be angry. So when my 1-year-old would walk into my office because I worked at home, I'd freak out at him and I'd yell at him, and I was scary. I was mean, I was scaring. And the bottom line was I was hurting big time because I didn't know what to do. I felt like I needed to be in control of everything. And you can't be in control when you're a dad because you've got a kid and then you're married. And so like you've got all these other people, and I was losing it because I could no longer be in control. So instead of controlling me and controlling my reactions, the best thing that I thought was like, I'll just control everyone else by being bigger and angrier. And interestingly, that didn't work. And I don't know if anyone's tried that listening, but I hear that from a lot of guys that they also do that and it doesn't work. And so I had to learn the most painful way that it was about me, and I had to take responsibility for everything that was going on, even though it wasn't necessarily my fault. I had to take responsibility for it. And that includes in the family present day as I was going through it, but also all the things that I was struggling with. I judge from childhood, so to speak, and everything that happens to you, right? Because there's stuff that patterns and bringing up that you just take for granted, and you never really say that unless you're in good, in my opinion now, male relationships where you can speak about that. So anyway, longer story, slightly shorter, is we start doing, the family thing. We've got a couple of kids at this point. We go, why don't we just move somewhere and do the whole digital nomad online marketer thing? Because I was working online. So we moved to Thailand, and we spent a couple of years traveling around, and it was awesome.
Wow.
But here's the thing. It was awesome, and it was about 20 years of life in 2 years because I hit rock bottom and I skimmed. It wasn't just like, ooh, once that hurts. It was like bang, 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 bang. And during this time in Thailand, when all of my structure, my habits, my control that I had painstakingly built up with anger, once that was gone, because I didn't even know where to get food, we landed and we got into the hotel, and I was like, what about breakfast? I don't even know how to get to I don't even know where you buy food or how to ask for it. So my life gets just thrown into the wind, so to speak, and I just crater. So I am meaner and angrier, and I get to a point where I think I'm the worst part of my family. They would be better off if I was dead. And that was reality for me because I was so bad, and I knew it and I could see it. And for me, it felt hopeless because I just couldn't do any better. So I don't know at the time where the strength came from, but I see now, looking back, by God's grace alone, I was able to push through day by day to get to a point where it started to get better. A little bit more humble, a little bit less reactive, a little bit more thoughtful and introspective. Why am I like this? A lot of journaling. Finally, when we moved back, I did a bunch more work, and I got into like the new age stuff. And you know what? I was getting better. And so God was using this for me to get to the point where he was like, hey, by the way, this is me. So anyway, I didn't know that at the time, but I'm going through this and I'm doing a lot of work and I'm really chilling out and all these things are happening around me, but it sucked for years. And I finally got to a point where it didn't. And I felt like, man, I made it. Guys got to learn about this because it almost cost me my life. In there as well, when we made a stop in Eastern Europe, my wife threatened to leave me with the kids and go back to Canada. So like I was just failing all over the place. And it got to a point where, man, like I had to figure this out or I was going to lose everything forever, including potentially my life if I went down that path. Yeah. So figuring that out, I knew if I started going to men's groups, I started talking to other men, I started opening up to other men, which was vital for me. I just learned that like so many other guys are struggling and they don't know how to walk this path. So with DadWork, I was like, one day I told a friend on the way to a mountain biking trip, I was like, one day I'm going to maybe speak on TED stages about fatherhood and like how to be a good dad. That'd be awesome. And then 2 or 3 years later, an opportunity presented itself where business fell through, something else happened. We sold one business and I'm like, I'm just going to do the dad thing. So here we are on Instagram, podcast, all that kind of stuff. And over the last year and a half, almost 2 years now, we've just been building DadWork. But it all started from me absolutely failing at being a dad and a husband and a family leader.
Yeah. Which is amazing to think of, that how many great starts actually are from the failings that we've experienced.
Yeah.
For
me, all of them.
Yeah, that's true. Well, because like a lot of guys will see, it's been my experience, that a lot of guys, their definition of success is skewed. And if I'm not succeeding, then I'm failing, versus this idea that failure is part of the journey. Learning what not to do is sometimes more important than learning what to do. And that's what I'm hearing throughout your story is, look, I blew it in so many big ways. And you got along other guys who were also brave enough to say, I'm blowing it as well. How can we do this thing better?
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is though, it's not just failure being part of success, it's success because of failure for me.
Mm.
So all of the things that I had to go through, I'm now in our coaching group. I'm like, oh, hey, man, in this situation, I was there. So my job, my ability to help people, my ability to serve is based on having gone through suffering. And I now look back at all the things that I used to judge and want. I spent so long looking for forgiveness from my parents. It's like, if they could just say sorry, if they could just take ownership, like a little baby, right? I was being a victim.
Mhm.
And I finally realized all of the suffering and the hardship that I judged, that I experienced, all led me to being who I am today.
Mm.
So all of the pain led to the growth. And it was because I suffered and struggled that I was able to succeed. So I just look back now and go, man, I am so grateful for everything that happened to me, even though it sucked at the moment, in the moment. And I was reading through my my scripture this morning, and he was talking about discipline, not feeling good in the moment, but leading to righteousness and all these other things. And I'm like, man, that is so true, and that's my entire story. And so I'm grateful now. And I think when you get to that point of gratitude for everything that happened to you, that is a powerful place to be, because there's no more victim, and you just thank whoever was in your life for whatever they were doing there, because they were probably doing their best, even if their best sucked. And that's where I've got to. And that's a really nice place to be compared to where I came from.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking of that. What's the phrase or the whatever it is where it's like not learning to lose, but what you do in that, like, because I've been around a ton of people that all they do is win. And it's like when they hit something bad, that's it. They implode and they don't know what's going on and they don't know what to turn. They don't know what to do. And so, I mean, hearing your story, hearing exactly what you went through, I think the best people to help other people have gone through that something, right? Where you talked about your coaching and you're like, I've already been there. Like, it's all right. Like, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
Stop whining, stop being a victim. I was there too. Like, everything's cool. I love it, man.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah, exactly. And I think in that there's so much power for me to where I want or who I want to speak into my life.
Mhm.
And that's what I tell guys too is don't worry about criticism from someone who's not living the life you want to live or has gone through what you're going through.
Man.
And in
Yeah.
the same token, don't look for help from people who aren't where you want to be. And you're right, man. Like, it's so much more powerful to be like, rather than, oh, I read this in a book and let's therapize this. It's like, dude, I went through this.
Yeah.
And it sucked. And maybe this will work for you. I'm not going to say for sure because your experiences are different, but it's probably going to work because it worked for me and I'm just some guy.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you're right.
Yeah, there's a way out. You're not
Totally.
alone in the struggles. There's people have made it through it. People have come out
Yes.
the other side better for wear.
Yes,
Maybe
exactly.
maybe a little worse for wear, but better for wear because of the experience. And we actually even talked about that. So we had a whole episode talking about regrets and all that. And it's just that idea of, you know what, it shaped me into who I am today. Could I have foregone some of those things in my mind, but not if I wanted to be who I am.
Yeah.
And to be and have God use those to shape me and to grow me and and to give more character and all those things that he promises by going through trials of various kinds, despite whether we want it or not.
I think that's huge for for kid, dad, right? You're talking about being a dad, like everything you're doing. And I want my kids to succeed at everything, but at the same time, I want to give them leeway to fail. Right. And I think that's the hardest thing. Like right now, I'm in a season where I have an 18-year-old daughter and she's about to leave. And I'm like, here's all the information. Like, I've been teaching all this stuff. Have you been listening? I don't even know if you've been listening. Okay, bye. And I'm like, oh no. Like, but trying to understand that it's okay to fail. I don't know. It's just something I'm going through like right now, just thinking about it, like how I guess what I would want my kids, I don't know how you like talk to other dads or something like that, but giving them a chance to fail, but also maybe it's not as bad as what we went through. I don't know.
I think about that all the time. And I just need to, like, for the listener who's not,
Yeah.
doesn't know me necessarily, I've got, my oldest is 10. So who am I to talk to you guys about parenting? But here's at least my experience. So please allow me to, like, have the humility to say, I don't know what I'm talking about. But I think about this stuff a lot, and whatever that counts for. The thing is, like, because of what I just said,
Mhm.
I love who I turned out to be because of the struggle.
Yeah.
But I don't want my kids to struggle.
Right.
And so, like, how am I going to give them the opportunity to grow through hardship? And it just comes down, at least from what I'm experiencing, to intentional hardship. Where can I let them do the hard thing without saving them? And here's the thing. For me, I think I should have been a statistic. Divorced home, mother got very sick, wasn't really around, dad had multiple wives. I should be seeking comfort somewhere else. And that didn't happen. And part of that is like, okay, great. Maybe if I throw my kids into, like, the deep end, they'll get out of it. But what I didn't have was that stable family to say, hey, bud, I love you. Like, no matter what, by the way. And so what would it have looked like for me to go through hardship with that backing? And so I always remind my wife, because we actually are hard on ourselves sometimes, going like, man, we take so much responsibility for our parenting because it's so important. It really is so important. As a father, you can make or break, and you know what? God's going to override all of that. Thank God. But you can make it way harder on your kids to go through to the point where they can find what they're looking for and hopefully fill that father-sized hole in their heart with God. Now, I had to do that, and it was very painful. But the thing that we are reminding ourselves now, because I see how important parenting was for me, I see my kids react to my parenting. I tell my wife, like, hold on, we have to remember neither of us know what it looks like to grow up with a loving family. And I'm not saying our family didn't love us. I mean, like, an intact nuclear family that can say at the end of every single day when we sit down to dinner, I love you, I'm proud of you, how can I help you? All of these things. So, man, my kids could suffer probably more than me and handle it better than me, because they'll never know what it's like not to have dad there going like, hey, buddy, I love you, and I'm proud of you, and you're enough, and I'm pleased with you. The affirmation and the validation and the unconditional love, they can take a lot. And so when I think about things that they can do, I'm not saving them from a lot of hardship. Like, my 10-year-old just got a job delivering papers, and his 8-year-old brother helps him. See ya. Like, I'm going to help you for the first month so you know where you're going, but it's your job now. And when there are things that are frustrating at school, because we homeschool them, you're not going to talk to me that way if you're frustrated. I'm going to validate the emotion. Sure. See that you're frustrated right now, but you're going to do that. And guess what? If you're disrespectful to your mother, because we've set these boundaries, you're doing double. And you just know that's a thing, but I'm going to make you do that as your father, not because I hate you, but because I love you and I'm teaching you something here. So there's so much, like, intention, I guess is the word, that comes in today's modern age where everything is so freaking easy. Because what real struggle do we have other than, like, familial struggle? Going like, oh, I'm not good enough, my parents weren't there, blah, blah, blah. So make it harder on them, knowing that you're there to guide them and catch them when they fall. And that's at least what I'm trying to do, is push them, give them responsibilities, so that when we're walking, like the first month or whatever, I was walking with him, he was delivering papers, carrying the wagon, doesn't want to let me do it because he's like, oh yeah, I feel good about this. And yet we walk by the school that they used to go to. All the kids are pressed up against the fence going, I think that's George. What is he doing? Why isn't he at school? What's going on? But they looked like they were caged. And my son was out there doing the hard thing, taking responsibility and being free. And for me, that was wonderful. And so, like, it's decisions like that to allow the pain to happen. And I had a guy on my podcast, last thing I'll say on this, so I'm going to little tangent here. I had a guy on my podcast. He's like, man, I heard, and I think this was from his dad to him. He's like, my dad told me if I was likely to die, he'd step in. But if I was likely to break an arm, that's my problem. And I'm like, that's a pretty good thing, because you allow the safety of, I'm not going to let you die, because that's a little extreme, even for me. But
hard to learn that lesson.
Exactly. Very hard to learn the lesson. But if you're going to, like, break your arm, it's not the end of the world, and it's going to suck, but you're going to learn. And if our kids don't get the chance to learn themselves, they're not going to just listen to what we say. They're going to go looking, I think John Eldridge says in his book, do I have what it takes?
Yeah.
That's the question in
Yeah.
every boy's heart. Do I have what it
Yes.
takes? And unless they do it, they're not going to believe you when you're like, oh, sure, just don't do it because it's scary for me.
Yeah.
So you have to get out of your own way as a father, I think, or I've had to get out of my own way to want to save them from themselves and just let them do hard stuff.
Oh yeah.
I love this because the whole time I'm thinking, if more dads, parents, period, did this, we'd have less of what you see everywhere. I mean, less of like a tantrum throwing at an airport from a grown adult. And it's like, like, okay, you missed your flight or your flight's delayed. Like, what are you going to do? Like, control your emotions.
Exactly.
But, you know, I mean, I go like my wife comes from a huge family. And when we had our first daughter, she was preemie. And when she finally came home and all that stuff, one thing we told ourselves is, one, we don't want to talk like a baby to her. And two, we weren't going to rush over if she fell or something like that. We would go help, of course, not just leave her there like floundering, but we didn't want to rush over.
Look, she's like a turtle.
Yeah. and what we saw, and we didn't even know this, it was just something we had decided to do because she helped raise her brothers were a lot younger than her. And so she was around them as babies. And she's like, that's just what we did. And what we saw as they grew is that they weren't babies. Like, as far as emotional or like they bumped their head, it was okay. They got up and started running again or whatever. They didn't just lose it. And I think that like what you're spreading is amazing, because I wish more dads would just step in and like draw that line.
Yeah. And
I was just going to say, just even that's the sentence right there. More guys would just step in. More dads would step in. I don't even know necessarily know if they need to draw that line. Just if we could get them just to step in, you know. And I'm sorry, Curt, what were you going to say?
No, I'll piggyback on that because I know, you know, we're talking about not being average.
Yeah.
If you're a father, can you imagine here's this scenario. Okay. You're a father. You could be average. You could be comfortable. You can be, you know, I'm working my 9 to 5. I kind of complain about it. And I go home. Hopefully the wife's made some food. And then like I watch football and then I go to bed and I'm tired on the weekend. So I need a little bit of me time. Dude, you're never with your kids. And that's normal. And so you're like, well, I'm no worse than average. Whatever. Like it's hard.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Dude, your wife gave you her life and your kids didn't ask to be born, and you have so much influence on them as a father, and you're choosing average. For me, there's no average as a father. It's either you are smashing it, doesn't mean like everything works, it means you are trying to have everything work all the time, or you're failing. I think average is failure as a husband and father because it's way too important. If nothing else, if you're not elite at anything else in your life, but you're a great husband and father, that's all you need. You don't need to be a bodybuilder. You don't need to be making $1 million. I would rather have horse blinders on, make a decent living in a small community, never travel, never do anything for me, but know that my wife and kids feel so safe and loved. That is like baseline for me as a husband and father. And I fail at that all the time, but it is my ideal. I never let myself go, you know, I'm pretty tired today. I'm not going to try that hard with the wife and kids. Like, can you imagine, bro, you've got a family.
Yeah.
Like literally, if you're listening to this and you're a dad, you've got a family. And if you're not a dad, you're going to want a family. Why would you want to do anything other than be a lead at that? And it's not that hard. It's not easy, but it's simple. And that's what I try to tell guys. Like, yeah, I share the same thing every day, but it's about being, for me, my sort of thing is be hard to kill and easy to love. That's the perfect balance in my mind. And at the beginning, at the center of that, you become equipped to lead.
Yep.
And it just takes like morning routine, a little bit of exercise, a little bit of prayer, a little bit of reading, a little bit of, I don't know, stretching or something like that. Work hard and then come home and leave work at work and put your phone down and play with your family and serve your wife.
Yep.
Very simple, not so easy in this modern world where we're so distracted. But anyway, man, average.
Like,
can't believe it.
Chris, right there, you could stop it. Listen.
I know. We're not.
I mean, I resonate with this so much because one, you know, I mean, my story is ridiculous, but like very pride, you know, I think all men deal with pride. Fathers, everybody deals with pride. Once you start like prioritizing your life with Christ and understanding all that stuff, all of a sudden that love permeates everything. But even though I want love, I want people to see Jesus in me, I want all this stuff, at the same time, though, I want to be hard to kill. And
Yeah.
I want my kids to see that. I want my boys to see that so they grow up like that. I want my daughter to see that so she knows the man that she ends up with better be just like that. Like, doesn't have to be me, but better be like that. Like, I want that. And I want my wife to be able to, like you said, just feel safe and led, and everything's okay. You know, even though you're going to struggle, like there's just life. But yeah, you could drop the mic and end it right there. That's it. Period. Boom.
Let's go.
I love it. Chris, stop pleasing people right now, Chris. Stop it.
Stop it.
Don't do it.
Well, that was actually, for me, being a dad of 3 girls, my goal had become, I'm going to love these girls so much. I'm going to build them up, and I'm going to make sure that they know their worth so well that when they get older and they start looking at guys, that their line, right? Their gauge, what am I thinking of? Their standard, right? Their standard will be adequately high. I mean, not so out of the park, but adequately high, that they're not going to just be going out. I didn't have to be the shotgun dad sitting on the porch, or although there were times where I, like maybe a guy came over and I said, "Hey, you want to see my knife collection?" Maybe later. So I'm not saying that I didn't ever do that. I'm not saying that was right, but also the better I got at it, the more that where, so once it's like, hey, come, I want you to meet this guy, or the guy came and said, I want to date your daughter. I didn't have to be like, okay, let me pull out the ream of questions that I'm going to go, because I know that if you've made it this far, then your character is high enough for me then to accept you, let you, get to the next phase of of the process.
I love that. I was going to ask you, Curt, so you said you do coaching, right? So what's the common theme when guys are reaching out to you? Is it specifically about, husband or dad, or like what's the common theme, I guess?
Yeah. So it's called Dad.Work because it's doing this kind of work for dads, which I found was unusual because there's a bunch of dads online doing like, look at my stupid meme. Isn't being a dad so hard? Isn't my wife so annoying? And it's like, those are the dads. And then you had like the serious guys who are like, here's how to self-actualize into an alpha, but they're not dads. And so it's like, okay, how do we actually get dads to do the work, knowing that it's different? Yeah. It's different. I've sat in groups of dads and non-dads. Yeah. And when a dad can look someone else in the eye and go like, man, I am so exhausted and I don't know what to do. And I love my kids so much and I'm lost. That weight, that burden that fatherhood carries is different. And so for me, it was like, hey, we're going to do all this interpersonal work to be a great man. It's just going to have to be for dads because it's different. Yeah. And now you've got all the motivation you need in the entire world. So usually what happens, there's probably one of two. I mean, a lot of the guys come in entrepreneurial or career driven. They've put their head down for 10 years, 7 to 10 years. They've got their, they've reached a point where they want to reach financially or otherwise. And then they pull their head up to go like, oh, I've made it. And they realize their wife and kid are like a mile behind. And they're like, oh, I don't even know my kids anymore. And my wife doesn't look at me. So that's one where guys are just like, I don't know what's going on. The other one is sort of what Chris was talking about in our podcast, being the people pleaser, having no boundaries, not knowing how to lead, and having their wife have to step in because they've abdicated that leadership. The wife is now resentful, as makes a lot of sense. And he's like, well, I want to lead, but she's not letting me. And as soon as he says she's not letting me, I'm like, dude, you're being the wife. Yeah. Sorry. But it doesn't make a lot of sense to say things like that and not take responsibility. So those are like two of the usual ones. Sometimes a guy will come in with anger. I do reach a lot of guys like that because that's where I came from. I was a bad everything. So if you're a bad man, husband, or father, I can help probably because I was all three. And what we're trying to do is basically make you an elite family leader. And for me, that's all, like I just said, hard to kill, easy to love, equipped to lead, but it's to leave the legacy that truly matters, which is not like your name on a science building at the university or a library. It's like a family who hopefully loves and glorifies God and loves each other. That's the legacy that I want. I want to be like 98 years old, Lord willing, on my rocking chair and see like 5 generations of Storrings and all of them loving each other. And then once in a while coming up to me and going like, thanks, Grandpa Curt, for being the rock.
Yeah.
I'm like, that is all I wanted in my life. And if I can do that in this generation for my kids and myself and my wife, and then they can raise kids and they can raise kids and they can raise the kids because of me doing the hard work, that's what I want. So, and that's what most of the guys coming in are looking for is like, something's missing. This isn't supposed to suck so bad. I shouldn't wake up every day going like, oh, wife and kids.
Yeah.
I should wake up going like, oh, yes. Like, what a gift. This is amazing. And guys just lose that. And I think they know. I think there's this inherent sense of like, something's off. Why is that? And so they'll come in typically looking for, how do I lead? How do I feel like a man? How do I like help my wife let go of that leadership by getting trust? That's another big thing we work on is earning trust back. So yeah, there's a 2, 3, 4 types of man that typically come in. But if you're not leading and you don't feel like a good dad or husband, that's usually the baseline.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's, I was just, when you said the not leading, that's something that Jamie has said to me only once. Right. Where something happened where I'm like, well, see, you know, I this is why I said this, or this is, she turned to me, she goes, you know, it's not my fault you didn't lead. Ouch.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, that's your point. You spot the lie, right? So, but you know, actually, you had brought up something that's really critical, right? As far as this idea of having a family that's just glorifies God and honoring God, a legacy, right? And this is something that I think that is really important. This is something newer to you, right? Because you just recently became a Christian. So I mean, right. And I know that I've gotten, you know, and I know Brad, you grew up in the church. I didn't grow up in the church. And I've actually gotten where people are like, well, it's easy for you. You grew up in the church. I'm thinking, no, I didn't become a believer until I was almost 30. My life was, I was into New Age. We could do a whole episode on the crazy stuff that I gotten into, but Curt, but we want to hear about you, Curt. You know, so do you mind sharing some of that story about how that came about?
Yeah, I love sharing this, and I used to hate it because I felt like putting myself in the spotlight was really shameful. And someone told me, hey, this is not your story, it's God's. So I'm just going to lead with that humility and praise God in this story. So along my sort of New Age journey, same sort of thing. I did like all the weirdest, you know,
Crystals.
Demonic things, and you know, there's you know, ingestibles and, you know, conscious altering stuff that like, I'm just so grateful it didn't end worse than they did. But here I am, and I'm in this group, and all my friends are going like, dude, I just need like, you know, the next time I go on this cacao ceremony, the next time I go on this meditation retreat, the next time I go and do like mushrooms for the 87th time, then I'm like, I'm really close to finding out who I am. And I was like, when does it end? When does it end? And I was the only guy in my circle who was married, only guy with kids. And I felt kind of like everyone's dad in my groups. And I was like, something's off here. Look at the fruit. Look at the fruit of how these people are living. And I pray for them all the time that they would find Christ too. And I know some of them have in my own journey and just sharing that. But I got to the point where I felt I was good. I was like, oh, I don't need any more of this stuff. I took myself out of that sort of world and went, pat on the back. Curt, you're awesome. You're the only person who you know that got out of this like perpetual cycle of, you know, self this and self that. Great job. And literally that was New Year's of, I guess last year, 2022, I guess. And like within a week, and I looked back in my DM, so I know exactly when this was, like within a week of being like, I'm the best. I came across Christ on my Instagram like 3 times in a week. And it was guys who I didn't really know. They were kind of talking about masculinity, I should say. And I was like, I didn't know that about Jesus, because I had always had this assumption. And literally until that moment, it felt like there was a veil over my eyes. My grandparents are believers. They became believers when they were like 33, but I've known them as believers their whole lives. They, you know, went to church with them as a kid a couple times, didn't really push it on me, but they were always there. And I was just like, doesn't make any sense. It's kind of dumb. And so I judged it harshly. And so as this came up, I was like, ooh, that's weird, interesting. What's going on here? So I started asking questions. I was like, guys, I think you're cool with your content, but like, you got to be kidding me. This Jesus stuff, I don't think so. Like, what about this? And then they came back with some answers. And I was like, ooh, nobody's ever said that before. So I started looking for more ways to question it,
Yeah.
which led me into doing all the reading. Like, man, I became obsessive. I was like, I'm going to disprove this as the last thing I do. This is way too bizarre. And like, you know, I was always the agnostic because I thought it was totally ridiculous that, you know, God could just create the world and nothing. But I also, you know, intellectually honest here, thought it was ridiculous that it could come from nothing. So I was like, I don't really know what's going on, but I don't care. It doesn't matter to me in my day-to-day life.
Yeah.
As I went along, read as many apologetics books as I could, things like The Case for Christ and what's the other one? Letters from a Skeptic and C.S. Lewis, Mere Christianity. Like I have like 10 books I read, ended up reading through the whole New Testament, read like so many YouTube things, debates with atheists and all this kind of stuff. And I would bring it to my wife because we're like, we love doing the intellectual sort of stuff together. She's so smart and I love that about her. And I would be like, oh, Christianity didn't get this thing. And I'd explain this like half-hour diatribe to her. And then she'd be like, well, what about this, this, and this? And I'd be like, oh no, me trying to disprove it made me believe it more. What is going on here? Like every time I try to be like, well, they missed this thing, we'd realize, oh, actually, no, that makes perfect sense with what I can see around the world, which for me was important. Like objectively, I can see this is true. Objectively. And I'm like, that's not supposed to be the case. It's supposed to be about like blind faith. And the faith might not be something you can see, but like, man, looking around the world, read through the Bible, it's freaking happening. That's how the world is laid out. It's very self-evident to me now. But through this journey, which was 5 months, so January to May, we finally, I was like, my wife had these friends of my son's friend who went to church. And I was like, can you ask them if we can just come just once? Like, I'm just going to see what happens. And they were like, sure, you can come. Why don't you come on this Sunday? It'll be great. Like, don't worry about it. No stress. And they were like, what's going on here? So we go, and it was like the perfect message, just like the perfect message. One of those times. And they're like, do you want to come back to our place after? Just let's like talk about it, because the guys that we went to, the guys we went with, my son's friend's mother and father, they were worrying that the message was like too harsh for an outsider. He talked about, you know, the pit of fire or whatever, and he was worried. He's like, you could come back to our place. We can like explain that to make sure you're not scared about it. And I was like, dude, no, I need the truth. I'm looking for the truth. And for me, this whole thing was, what is the truth? And I started, my very first question in this whole thing was, why is there something, not nothing? That's curious because I've never even asked that question. And so, okay, well, I can get to the point where it makes sense that some God created it. But then who is that God? And why is it not one of these 37 other ones that people talk about? And it's like, oh man, I'm kind of convinced it's the Christian God. What does that mean? How could that be real? And I went through all this stuff, but at that church and afterwards, when we went to their house, they were so kind to us. They prayed with us. And that was Sunday, obviously. The Monday, I was like white knuckling it. It's like, God, if you're there, show me. Why can't you just show me? I'm ready to believe. But like there was this last thing, and I had been getting signs left, right, and center. Reading through my father's Bible. He died like 9 years ago. I don't even know how I got his Bible. He's got notes in there. He's got like underlines. There was one, Mark 6:50, when he's walking on the water, Jesus says, do not be afraid, it is I, take courage, or something like that. I might have had that backwards. But that's the only thing in his whole Bible that he underlined. And when I read that passage, I had asked, God, if you're real, show me, reveal yourself. And here it says, it is I. And that blew my mind. So I had all these things all over the place, and I was white knuckling, and I couldn't get over the edge. I was trying myself. Now I'm thinking back to it. I think it's the first time I've realized this. I was trying to get myself over the edge. And it just wasn't happening. I was like, if you put a gun to my head, can't be sure that I would say yes here. And so on Tuesday morning, I was like, fine, I'm dropping this. This is stupid. Like, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. I cannot do anything else because I'm obsessed at this point. I go to the gym, and on my way home from the gym, I go to Spotify and I put in these 2 songs. I had been sent 2 songs over the last 5 months. And I'm like, I'm not going to listen to this worship music. Like, are you kidding me? I think this is so stupid. I'm not listening to the music. And so 2 separate people at 2 separate times. And I finally, for the first time, I hadn't listened to them before. I put them on and I was like, oh, I guess I'm not letting it go. So I put them on. And man, in that moment when the songs hit, I just like, I can't say it any other way. It just take it. Like saved in that moment. I knew it was true. I was like, oh no, everything's real. What does this mean? So I'm like on the highway, tears streaming down my face, trying to make it home. I get home, close my garage, and cry for like 30 minutes straight. and play these songs over and over. And I was like, oh, what just happened? Like, me, of all people, I was shocked and almost embarrassed still, because I was so judgmental about what this meant. I was like, how could I be doing this? What's wrong with me? I went upstairs and I told my wife, I was like, I think it happened. I think this means that, like, I believe all of the stuff we've been talking about for the last 5 months. Please don't hate me. And, thank goodness that she had all the grace, and she was along her own journey and has since been saved as well. Praise God. And it's like, man, that was the start of it. And I've just been like all in ever since. And it's so good, and it's so complete, and it's so perfect. So that's mine. That's my story.
I love it. So I want to hit on something real quick that, like, I mean, your whole story is powerful, but you go to church and the preacher's up there laying the truth out. And I think so many churches miss that because they want to coddle everybody in that service. And they're worried about the person like you coming in, and they're worried about, what are they going to think if I preach this? What are they going to think if I say this? And it's like, just preach the word of God. Just preach it. Like, there's so much truth in there, so much love. There's so much everything. Just preach this. And I mean, you're a living testament of that. Just hearing that truth. It's just truth. Hearing that truth, not coddled. This is the truth. Take it or leave it. Here it is. And then that progresses you down your journey. But I mean, I'm not a pastor. But that gets me fired up when I hear sermons or other churches where they're just kind of coddling everyone. And I'm like, man, lay it out there. Just drop it.
Yeah, exactly. And that was so good. And that we still go to this church. It's a Bible believing, Bible reading, verse by verse church. They were, just love them to death. They were one of the only ones around me that stayed open during the lockdowns. And for me, that was very important because they were putting God first. And, all the people there are such a good family. But it was me. I heard this somewhere. I can't remember who it was. He said, we've been trying to hug young men into the church. Young men don't want to be hugged into the church. They want to be like boxed, like challenged. And when when I heard this, and the pastor was like, it's just a sad reality that if, you're the sexually immoral and this and that, and the other people, whatever, are going to spend eternity in the lake of fire. And that's what the word says. And like, we need to save these people. We need to preach the gospel to these people lest they die like forever. Man, like, there's so much love in there. There's so much truth in there. It's just God's word. And I think so many times I poo-pooed Christianity because Christians weren't something to look up to.
Yeah.
The churches were not something to look up to. It was all like, the world and culture has shaped so many Christians and churches. And I've not been around them long enough to have any opinion on this other than I didn't want anything to do with it until this point. And it was largely because it was so weak. And since that time, seeing that Christ is the perfect man, the perfect husband man, and like, man, so masculine, ridiculously masculine, and loving is part of that. Sacrifice is part of that. Confidence and conviction is part of that. Like, oh, it's so good if you're looking for a model. And as I was doing my stuff, it's like, oh, how do you be a good dad? I'm like, well, you pick some of this and you pick some of that. I'm like, oh, dude, God the Father, perfect father, let's go there. Christ as perfect man and perfect husband, let's go there. Now you've got a model, and you just have to do the reading to figure out, who was Jesus? How did he act? Then you try to be like that. And that's the whole journey. We're like, working out our salvation through that. And it's incredible. Now I don't have to worry, like, am I being a good dad? I don't know. Am I being Christ-like? Am I being like God? If not, then I'm being a bad dad. And I can get better through his will and through him who strengthens me. And dude, it's so good. Like, I'm almost like, why do we even need to do dad work now? Just go read the Bible. Like, just go and read the Bible. It's all in there. Stop being dumb. But for guys like me who are not in it already, I need that person to be like, bro, I hear you and you're wrong. And here's why. And I didn't need the whole, like, oh, it's okay, love and light. Like, the other side can do their love and light until till the end of days. But unless there's conviction and the gospel in there, it doesn't matter. So anyway, that's my real rant.
No, absolutely. You gotta have truth and love. It's got to be a mixture of both. Because if you just have all truth, then then it can push people away because there's no grace, right? If all love, well, there's no truth, and then what do you hold on to? What do you put? You gotta, I was just wanted to throw in real fast because after I had gotten saved, that one of the first things I did was like buy every book I could get my hands on to make sure that I wasn't like I wasn't a fool for making that decision. Like
Yeah.
you go through, and then I started listening to what my family would call my Jesus music. Oh, he's listening to his Jesus music, which of course now that's all we listen to,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But at the time, oh, he's listening. Yeah, and there are songs which because I want to hear about what those if you remember those two songs. But I know there was one like from DC Talks, if that just gives you any kind of
Okay.
reflection on how old I was, how long ago that was. But there's Consume Me, and I would listen to that song, and I'm just like, wow. So, but yeah, Kurt, what were those songs? Do you remember?
Okay, so you know what? I really wish it was a cooler answer because I don't like these songs, but they're the ones that did it for me. So they're forever etched. They're forever in my worship playlist. One was Love Move First by Casting Crowns. The other one is Reckless Love by Corey Asbury.
Oh, okay,
So that's not remotely what I listened to, and yet it was the thing that did it. So, you know, it's clearly not me. It's clearly God.
Yeah.
Therefore, like, you know, awesome. Whatever works for me, that's what it did it.
So that's awesome. That's awesome. No, thanks for sharing that. All right. Well, so you've had this DadWork, right? Which application. That's right. It's all about application. That's the challenge. If all we could do, if everybody could just read and not just be hearers of the word and be doers, then all of us would be out of jobs. But people, but people don't know how to apply it, and they don't know how to put that into place. And you had this mechanism in place before you got saved, right? And so there's a pivot that you know is going on. Do you want to share some of those challenges about how now your faith is affecting your work? Because there's guys who are coming to Christ who they hadn't lived like in that way, and now they are, and so it's okay. How do I adjust? How does this become a change that isn't like weird?
Yeah, well, it was weird for me. That's the thing. It was highly, highly uncomfortable because I continue to this day still deal with the fear of man rather than the fear of God, and me putting my things out because I had done like almost 100 podcast episodes. I knew a whole bunch of guys in the space, and we're all like sort of not. I don't even know if it's new age because it wasn't like the crystals, but it was about it's self worship. All of that stuff is self worship, and that's why it doesn't work. But the whole space I was in. But being a good man, like having emotions, being really in touch with both sides, your feminine side. I'm like, bro, you don't have a feminine side. It's just, anyway, that's neither here nor there. But all of it was like, well, if I say I'm different now, they're all going to say, ooh, bro, I thought we liked you. I thought you knew what you were talking about. Now you're talking about Jesus. Like, I'm sorry, dude, but you're out. And my biggest fear has always been abandonment because that's what I experienced. That's what I felt I experienced growing up. And so if I could just fit in, there was a lot of that people pleasing too, Chris, honestly. It's like, if I can just see your emotions and then cater to them and then make sure that I don't do anything to make you upset, then I can sort of skate under the surface and you won't notice me and you won't tell me anything and I'll just get along with everyone. I never had like a clique in high school. I was always friends with everyone because I just like chameleon. So in this time of starting to say things about how to be a good dad, I had grown a little bit of a skin where I'm like, oh, haters are just going to hate, you know, and that's, you know, the cliche haters going to hate, I guess, but like, it's true. They're just a bunch of people who are going to call you an idiot for whatever you say. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go out there and like be me. And this came after I failed in probably the first thing I've ever failed at, which was a business before Dad.Work after I had sold my last company. So there was a lot of skin being built so that I could actually withstand this. But anyway, that was the thing, was fear of what these other people are going to say. If I came out and proclaimed the gospel, if I said, you know, Jesus, you know, is pretty good, guys, maybe look into him. Like, man, I was going to be kicked out. I was going to be ostracized. Everyone's going to hate me. And so I had really looked into this because I've got a weird job. Like, we've all got weird jobs, right? Who would have thought that you create content to go to the core of people's lives and then say, like, do this and carry on and you'll be better? What kind of, like, it's such a weird job. You think about that. My like core of my being has to always be on display.
Yeah.
Because then I'm not in authenticity and in integrity if it's not. So I am always fully open, and it's could be exhausting to some people. I have got very good at managing that, but I'm always open. So how do I authentically approach this? It's going to be different for guys who have normal jobs or families, pardon me, but even telling people in my family, like my grandfather, thrilled. He's been praying about me ever since he became a Christian, or I guess since I was born.
Yeah.
So, all these years later, and he was just thrilled. But telling my mom, telling my in-laws, telling people who didn't believe, they're like, I'm glad you found your truth. Good for you. That's okay. Sure. I guess if that's what you want to do with your life. So that was very hard to be disliked because of something that was so, I also still had judgment about. So through this process, I have slowly but surely put a little bit more out, surrounded myself with a lot of good Christian men who have my back. So when I do something like put a post out there or like have a story about like we're talking about here, I can be like, guys, I am feeling pretty exposed right now. Can you just like chat or pray or whatever for me and I'll be good to go. So that's been huge. But I also had to go through and go, what did I tell people that was true? And what did I tell people that wasn't true? So I had to go through my own values because that's what I put online. Like my number one thing is authenticity for what I put out there. I had to go through everything and say, is this actually true? And it was beautiful because I felt like I got supercharged into going, now I really know. And I'm still learning and I'm still doing all of that work. But at least from what I know from my reading and from my research and all this kind of stuff, the things that I'm teaching work because they're Christian, because they're biblical. And the things that don't work typically aren't. And I can throw those away and just have some humility in that to say, no, I was wrong about that. And here's what works. And the thing is as well, inside my program, we do coaching calls, we do a community, but I've also got training. So if you go through our training, there's a bunch of videos in there on relational aspects and building your legacy and your future and all that kind of stuff. But the last skills training video, I call it, we got things on boundaries and communication. The last one is called The Most Excellent Way. And it's just my testimony. I'm like, guys, do you want to know why this works? It's because it's true. So like all the things that you've got through this course already, your life is better, your marriage is better. We've got guys in there who used to almost be on the verge of divorce who are having kids now. Like, dude, everything's awesome. Guess why? And they're like, oh, dude, why? Because Jesus. And they're like, what? Okay. And so we've got guys who have come back to the faith. We've got guys who have come to the faith. And that is the most amazing thing. And it's very vulnerable and humbling for me because I'm like, oh, there's God like right there working with me, working through me. And it's incredible. So I really had to dive into everything that I did and tear my entire value structure down, which is very painful and annoying, by the way, when you're like, you're pretty sure what you believe. And it was just a process, and it has continued to be a process to this day. And I'm still not super comfortable going all into a person face to face who I know is not a believer. It's getting better. And I've been reading a little bit here and there on like, how to evangelize and all that kind of stuff. But like, man, that is still a very hard walk for me that I'm learning. So that's sort of what my walk has been thus far.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's incredible. Love hearing that. Love hearing that you had the humility to actually re-review yourself and go, hey, you know what? These don't work. This isn't effective. Here's what I've learned, and here's what's more effective. It's part of that going back to the beginning, right? Where was I failing, and where can I do it better?
Right.
How can I learn from that? How can I have the humility to learn from that, to know that no one arrives? If we're drawing breath, we haven't arrived. And so if you hadn't been doing it the best way, well, then it's time to change it. It's time to go ahead and go, that's okay. Nobody's doing it the best way. There's some people who are doing it better ways. Let's throw that stuff out and do the better thing. Why let that be an anchor that's just dragging you down?
Yeah, that's one of the things that I've been praying on recently is like, I'm so going back to my story about being a control freak with the kids and my anger and my wife. It's like, I want to know everything. I want to know every eventuality before and I'm a very fast actor, so I do this quickly, but I want to know everything I can before I act so that I can be very sure I'm not going to fail because I'm still scared of failure. Now, in that, I was, through my scripture in the morning, every single morning. By the way, if you want to be an elite man, husband, and father, you got to have a morning routine. You got to pray and you got to read the Bible every morning, in my opinion. That's how I do it. And you can fit that in your day, but it's got to be every day. So for me, reading through that, I was like, wait a second. God has a way better plan than me. And that's very humbling for me. And this whole journey has been humbling. I'm not the man anymore. I put myself on a pedestal, and I literally, through one of my prayer walks, I saw myself on this pedestal looking down at people going like, yeah, man, you are pretty good. Like, just let's be honest here. You're pretty good here. And then in my mind's eye, I saw this infinite pedestal and I just went, ooh, no, I just crumbled in that moment going, God, you are so much bigger.
Yeah.
and you have such better plans than me. And so why don't I stop controlling so much to let you do it? Because your plans are going to be better than mine. And so that's like literally, it's so hard for me. It is so hard to let go, but that's my prayer every morning for the last couple of months is let me release control and trust fully in you, trust fully in your provision, and like trust in your plan because it's better than mine. And man, it doesn't come easy when you've lived your whole life going like, oh, I can't trust anybody but myself.
Yeah.
So that's been another thing that I've had to work through that's not at all natural, so to speak, but is really good.
Yeah, surrender. Oh,
yeah.
man.
How about like just a little bit, right, God? Just like you can have this, but I want to keep this. No, it doesn't work.
Yeah. By the way, and I showed this to you before, but off of the Dad.Work, off of the Instagram, I've got the morning. It's backwards, but the Elite Dad morning routine. This is something I printed out. My producer sent it to me, and I printed it out, and I've had it in my office for for a couple of months. I can't say that I am always doing that, but it's a goal that I aspire to working on and to adjust to beat that. Okay. So speaking of that, and speaking of, right, and I know it's on Instagram's Dad.Work, you've got a website as well that people could find you. What's that's Dad.Work, right? Which threw me. Is it?
I know it's weird. It's not a .com. It's not a .org. It's .work. It's one of those new ones. And I typed it in one day and I was like, that sounds pretty cool. So I just picked Dad.Work. I think the best place to go to get like whatever we're doing is Instagram or Dad.Work/challenge, because that's this 10-day challenge that includes what you were just saying, the morning habit stack, the after work habit stack, communication challenges, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, we're as many places we can be: podcast, Instagram, email.
Yeah, which definitely, we're going to put all those links into the show notes because, guys, you got to check out Curt. You got to look into that, connect with him, get his resources, listen to his podcast, right? There's so much great material that's going on. Well, and it's even getting better now. Right.
That's right. Thank you. Well, especially because we had you on the other day. Now it's really good.
Oh, stop. I was thinking because you're a believer.
Right? I know. And I was just going to take it an extra mile there.
Yeah. Yeah. Come on. Stop.
Yeah.
No, stop. Okay. But anyway, so that's where we're going to put those in the show notes. So I guess let's wrap this up because I was so grateful that you spent this time and with us. And so, guys, look. The average man, he's going to, like Curt was saying, he's going to just settle for that he just put in his 9 to 5, that he's settled, that he's put his head down, and that he's worked through his goals for whatever means or reward that he was looking for, right? But the above average guy, the above average dad, the above average man, he's going to be more concerned about being the dad and not just being an average, not settling. It reminds me of that lukewarm. Where Jesus says, if you're lukewarm, I'm just going to spit you out. So don't be a lukewarm dad. Don't be okay with just, hey, I put in my time or I've got this work, because your real work is being a dad. Your real work is being a believer and a disciple who is then discipling and serving the people that God had given him to steward. And so, guys, if you don't know how to do it on your own, if just reading the Bible yourself isn't working, get with someone like Curt at Dad.Work. But whatever you need to do it so that way you could become better than your average man. Curt, thanks so again for joining us.
Awesome.
It's been awesome, man.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. This has been an absolute pleasure and really appreciate the time. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot.